In the courts of the kingdom of Altheria, there was a princess whose blindness made her invisible to all, until the day she opened their eyes forever. Her name was Amara, and from the day she was born blind, she became the royal family's shameful secret. The daughter no one spoke of in the grand halls, the princess erased from the kingdom's official portraits, but secrets have a peculiar way of transforming into truths no one can ignore. Amara grew up in the forgotten corners of the royal palace. While her sisters danced in halls lit by 1,000 candles, she walked through silent corridors, where only the echo of her footsteps accompanied her. While her brothers learned swordsmanship in the sun-drenched gardens, she memorized every uneven stone on the floor, every draft that shifted direction, every scent that revealed who was approaching. They thought she lived in darkness. They didn't understand that Amara inhabited a world infinitely more revealing. In the mornings, when the family gathered for the royal breakfast, Amara felt the weight of the silence that fell over the table when she entered. Not the respectful silence reserved for royalty, but that palpable discomfort that precedes embarrassment. Her sisters exchanged glances she couldn't see, but whose intent cut through the air like sharp blades. Her father, the king, cleared his throat with that specific sound that always preceded a change of subject. "Amara is late again," her mother, Queen Isolde, would say, with that tone that distilled refined disappointment in every syllable. "The other princesses have already finished. Always so. Clumsy. Clumsy. As if stumbling over furniture they deliberately moved was a character flaw. As if she'd chosen to be blind out of sheer stubbornness. But Amara had learned long ago that responding only fed the venom. So she remained silent, tasting the bitter flavor of maternal disdain as delicate fingers found the precise location of each piece of cutlery, each glass, each plate. Her movements were calculated, economical, perfect. Still, they only saw the blindness. They never saw the precision. The servants were perhaps the cruelest, hiding their contempt behind false pity. Amara heard them whisper when they thought she was out of earshot. "Poor thing," they'd say. "What a tragedy for the royal line." Others didn't bother hiding it. "Thank God she can't see how different she is," they muttered while cleaning her rooms. At least she spared that humiliation. Shame, as if her existence was intrinsically lamentable. But there were moments, small fragments of time they never noticed, when Amara perceived things that functional eyes would never grasp. When her elder brother, Crown Prince Davian, spoke of loyalty and honor during formal dinners, Amara detected the microscopic tremor in his voice when certain names were mentioned. She felt the tension that ran through his muscles when specific advisors entered the room. He was plotting something. Her perfect brother, with his impeccable appearance and inspiring speeches, carried secrets that simmered beneath the gilded surface. Amara knew. But no one asked the blind princess about palace conspiracies. When her sister Elise cried silently during official ceremonies, masking her tears with practiced smiles, Amara noticed. She smelled the salty scent that betrayed the pain, heard the almost imperceptible irregularity in her breathing. Elise was trapped in a marriage she hadn't chosen, with a man who was slowly destroying her. Amara knew. But no one asked the blind princess about invisible sufferings. It was in moments like these that a strange sensation grew within her, something that vibrated at the edges of her consciousness. A perception that went beyond the 5 traditional senses, as if the absence of sight had opened doors to dimensions others didn't even know existed. She sensed intentions before they transformed into actions. She perceived truths that carefully constructed lies tried to hide. The world called it intuition. Amara knew it was something far deeper. It was on a suffocating summer afternoon that the announcement came. The king summoned the entire court to the Great Hall. Amara felt the unusual tension in the air, that electric hum that always preceded major announcements. Her pulse quickened as she was led to her customary place, always at the edge, where inconvenient princesses were kept out of sight. "My loyal subjects!" the king's voice boomed through the stone hall. "The moment has come to strengthen our alliance with the Northern Kingdom. Princess Amara will be betrothed to Prince Aldrich of Valmont." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the laughter. Discreet at first, muffled whispers that turned into increasingly audible murmurs. Amara didn't need to see their faces to know their expressions. Incredulity, cruel amusement, condescending pity. Who would marry a blind princess? The question came from somewhere to her left, barely disguised as a confidential whisper. "The Northern Kingdom must be desperate," another voice added, provoking nervous laughter. Poor thing. Imagine the humiliation on her wedding night. The words cut like knives, each one designed to wound, to belittle, to reduce her to a single flaw. Amara held perfectly still, spine straight, face neutral. She'd learned long ago that showing hurt only encouraged cruelty. But her fingers imperceptibly tightened at the side of her dress, a microscopic escape valve for the storm raging within her. Her mother approached later, when the crowd had scattered into clusters of vicious gossip. "You should be grateful," Queen Isolde said, her voice icy and sharp. "No other prince would have you. Aldrich of Valmont is pragmatic. He understands marriages are political arrangements, nothing more. You should be grateful," her younger sister Serafina added with false sweetness. "At least someone was willing to take you." Amara finally spoke, her voice quiet but sharp as steel. "It's funny, really. Everyone assumes they know what I should be grateful for." Serafina blinked, caught off guard by the response. Isolde's lips tightened in disapproval. Then Amara turned and walked away. Her steps were measured, perfectly placed. No hesitation, no stumbling. She moved through the palace corridors with the confidence of someone who could see every stone, every corner, every shadow. Because she could, just not with her eyes. That night, alone in her chambers, Amara stood by the open window. The night wind carried scents of jasmine and damp earth. Distant voices drifted from the palace gardens, fragments of conversations about her upcoming wedding. Speculation about how long until Prince Aldrich looked elsewhere for company. They spoke of her as if she were an object, a piece on a political chessboard with no will of her own. But as Amara breathed the perfumed night air, that strange sensation surged within her again. Stronger, more urgent, as if something ancient was waking, something that had slumbered in her blood since birth. She reached out into the darkness, fingers meeting currents of air that seemed to curve around her skin like living silk. For a moment, impossible and undeniable, Amara could feel more than just the presence of things. She could feel their essence, the life pulsing in the distant trees, the turbulent emotions of the people in the palace, the invisible connections binding all living things in a web that only she seemed to perceive. A small, secret smile touched her lips. They thought they knew her future. They thought they understood what she couldn't do. They saw a fragile, broken creature deserving of pity. But Amara knew something they didn't. And soon, the entire kingdom would too. Preparations for the wedding began the next morning. The palace transformed into a hive of frantic activity. Seamstresses rushed through the corridors with expensive fabrics. Decorators debated floral arrangements. Cooks planned elaborate banquets. And amidst all that bustle, strange things began to happen. A seer appeared at the palace gates, demanding to see the blind princess. The guards turned her away, but her words spread through the kitchens like wildfire. "She who cannot see will perceive what all seers have failed to find." A traveling monk arrived from distant lands carrying ancient texts about princesses born with extraordinary powers awakened through heightened senses. The king dismissed him as a fraud, but the texts were abandoned in a library that Amara knew better than the back of her own hand. Birds migrated in unusual patterns, circling the palace in spirals that astronomers could not explain. Flowers in the garden bloomed out of season, and in dreams, people began to see a female figure whose blind eyes shone like stars. But no one connected these events to the shy princess who walked quietly through the corridors. No one, except Amara. Because she felt every change, every subtle shift in the reality around her, as if her mere existence was altering the fabric of the world, preparing it for something that was to come. She sat in her chambers, fingers tracing braille in an ancient book she'd discovered. And as she read about forgotten prophecies and awakening powers, that secret smile returned. The wedding was weeks away, but Amara knew something that would change everything. She was just waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Whispers of strange omens continued to drift through the palace like creeping fog. Servants spoke in hushed tones about birds flying in impossible patterns at night, about flowers blooming out of season in the wedding gardens, about prophetic dreams visiting the court elders, all pointing to the same event: the blind princess's wedding. Most laughed. Peasant superstition, they said. Coincidences exaggerated by the fertile imagination of those who seek meaning where there is none. But Amara listened to every account with absolute attention. She not only heard the words, but felt the truth vibrating behind them. There was something moving in the shadows of reality, something that physical eyes could never capture. And she was beginning to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, her blindness had never been a curse. Perhaps it was a doorway. On the morning marking 10 days before the wedding, Amara was summoned to choose the final ceremony decorations. A symbolic task, everyone knew. How could a blind woman choose between shades of silk and floral arrangements? But protocol demanded her presence, and so she was led to the grand hall where expensive fabrics were laid out on endless tables. "Your Highness," the voice of the ceremony organizer was polite, but tinged with thinly veiled pity. "We have brought the finest silks in the kingdom. Perhaps your ladyship would like to touch the fabrics and feel their texture." Amara extended her hand, but not to touch the fabric. Her fingers hovered in the air, trembling slightly. as if she were reading something invisible. Then she pointed to the left, to a table she theoretically couldn't have known existed. "That man," she said softly. "The one in the green tunic. He is not here to help with decorations." Silence fell like a guillotine. The organizer stammered, Your Highness, there is no one in a green tunic here." "Yes, there is." Amara's voice was firm, yet gentle. "Behind the third pillar, trying to blend in with the servants. He carries something beneath his clothes. Something that shouldn't be here." The guards moved instantly, and there, exactly where Amara had indicated, a man in a green tunic was found. Beneath his robes, a detailed inventory of the royal treasures, clearly prepared for a planned theft during the wedding's commotion. The whisper that swept through the hall was almost palpable. How did she know? How could she know? Amara simply smiled and returned her attention to the fabrics. "The cobalt blue silk," she said calmly, "with silver embroidery. That will be perfect." The organizer, still in shock, picked up the fabric Amara had indicated and almost dropped it. It was, in fact, the most exquisite combination of all. As if Amara could see not only the fabric, but the effect it would have when the candlelight danced upon it during the ceremony. In the corridors afterward, the assembled royal family discussed the incident in varying tones of discomfort and disdain. "Luck," declared Uncle Marcellus, the king's younger brother, with that affected laugh he used to disguise insecurity. "Pure luck. Probably heard footsteps or something." "The girl has sharp hearing," agreed Countess Viviane, a distant cousin who always found reasons to visit the palace during important events. "Everyone knows the blind develop other senses. Nothing supernatural about it." But one voice disagreed. "Perhaps you are looking, but not seeing." Everyone turned. It was Lord Edric, the kingdom's spiritual advisor, an elderly man whose eyes still shone with the clarity of youth. He had served the deceased king and now served Amara's father, but always maintained a calculated distance from the court's political intrigues. "With all due respect, Lord Edric," Marcellus retorted with poorly disguised disdain, "are you suggesting my niece has… what? Magical powers?" "I am suggesting," Edric replied with unshakable calm, "that there are forms of sight that do not depend on eyes, and that some of us are so blinded by the certainty of what we know that we cannot recognize what we do not understand." Viviane scoffed. Old man's philosophy. The girl was lucky. Nothing more. Edric did not argue. He simply bowed and left. But as he passed through the door, his eyes met Amara's across the crowd. And in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, validation, the silent promise that she was not alone. That night, Edric visited Amara's chambers. "May I enter, Your Highness?" "You may," Amara replied, and there was a note of relief in her voice. "I was expecting you." Edric closed the door softly. "You knew I would come." "I felt it," she corrected, "just as I feel many things lately. Things I shouldn't be able to feel." The elder sat down, his old joints creaking. "Your family believes your blindness was a tragedy, a curse from the gods for some unconfessed sin. And you? What do you believe?" "I believe," Edric said carefully, "that sometimes the gods do not take something from us. They merely exchange one kind of sight for another, rarer, deeper, truer." Tears touched Amara's eyes, not of sadness, but of something akin to overwhelming relief. "You understand. Your grandmother had the same gift," Edric revealed softly. "Before you were born, before your mother married the king, your grandmother saw things, knew things. Many called her a witch, but she was merely observant. Observant of realities others ignored. Why was I never told? Because when she died, your grandfather ordered the gift to be forgotten. He was afraid. Afraid of what people would say. Afraid of the power she possessed. So he buried the truth along with her." Amara absorbed this, feeling pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know she was assembling finally click into place. And now? What do I do with this? You learn, Edric said simply. You practice, and you prepare. Because those who fear what they do not understand will eventually try to destroy what they fear. My family. Some of them, yes, not out of malice necessarily, but out of fear, out of a loss of control, because they cannot accept that the girl they dismissed as flawed might be more powerful than all of them combined. The words hung in the air like prophecy. In the following days, incidents multiplied. Amara identified a foreign diplomat as a spy simply by the way his breathing changed when certain subjects were mentioned. She predicted a storm would delay the arrival of guests from the south, exactly 24 hours before any cloud appeared. She located a queen's lost necklace that had been sought for weeks, describing exactly which forgotten drawer it had fallen into. Each incident brought a mix of whispered awe and desperate rationalization. And with each explanation the court concocted, frustration grew, especially in Marcellus and Vivian. She's doing it on purpose, Marcellus hissed during a private dinner 3 days before the wedding, trying to draw attention to herself, making everyone think she's special when she's just a blind girl playing cheap tricks. I agree, Vivian added, her eyes gleaming with malice. And I think it's time we stopped feeding this fantasy. At tomorrow's blessing ceremony, in front of the entire court, we will expose exactly what she is, a fraud. What are you suggesting? Vivian's smile was venomous. You'll see. The blessing ceremony was a traditional ritual, held the night before the wedding. The entire court gathered in the grand temple to receive the blessings of the priests and make offerings to the gods. It was a solemn, sacred, and absolutely public moment. As Amara was led to the altar to present her offering, Marcellus rose. Forgive the interruption, he announced, his voice echoing through the stone columns. But I believe everyone here deserves to know the truth about our dear princess. Amara remained still, but her heart quickened. In recent days, Marcellus continued, we have heard extraordinary stories. Stories of impossible visions, of knowledge that defies explanation. And many have begun to believe that our princess possesses some kind of divine gift. He paused dramatically. But I propose a test. Simple, direct. If she can truly see what others cannot, then let her prove it to us. Now, here, in front of everyone. Vivian stood carrying an ornate box. Inside this box is an object. A sacred object I brought especially for this occasion. If Princess Amara truly possesses spiritual sight, she will be able to tell us what it is, without touching, without help. Just seeing. The silence in the temple was absolute. All eyes were fixed on Amara. Some with hope, some with curiosity, and some, like Marcellus and Vivian, with cruel certainty that they were about to publicly humiliate her. Amara felt the provocation. She felt the trap closing in, and she felt something more. A profound stillness settling in her core, like still waters before a revelation. She extended her hand, not towards the box, but towards Vivian. You didn't bring a sacred object, Amara said softly, her voice filling the space with crystalline clarity. You brought an empty box, and your intention was to make me guess, to err, and then to expose me as a fraud when you revealed there was nothing inside. Vivian's face paled. But what you don't understand, Amara continued, her voice now carrying a weight that seemed greater than herself, is that emptiness also has a form, and lies also have a sound, and both scream as loudly to me as any truth would scream to you. With trembling hands, Vivian opened the box. Empty. Exactly as Amara had said. The whisper that swept through the temple was like wind through dry leaves. Shock, awe, fear. And as Amara turned to return to her place, she made a final declaration. Not to the court, not to her accusers, but to everyone. The wedding will proceed as planned, and when the sun rises upon this union, all will see clearly who truly sees in this realm, and who merely pretends. The words hung in the air like an unspoken prophecy, and as the ceremony continued in tense silence, one thing became absolutely clear to all present. The blind princess saw everything, and the wedding day would prove who was truly blind. The day had arrived. The palace buzzed with a frantic energy that contrasted sharply with Amara's serenity. While servants rushed through the corridors carrying floral arrangements and precious fabrics, while cooks shouted orders in the kitchens and musicians tuned their instruments in the halls, she remained in her chambers like the calm eye of a storm. Lady Morgana and her allies, on the other hand, displayed poorly disguised nervous agitation. Their laughter sounded too shrill, their movements overly theatrical. They were trying to control the narrative until the last moment, spreading venomous comments disguised as concern. "What a solemn day for our dear blind princess," one of them whispered, loud enough to be heard. "I hope she can at least find her way to the altar." But something had changed in the palace atmosphere. The whispers no longer echoed with the same venom. There was now an undercurrent of expectation, a tension that wasn't just prenuptial nervousness. It was as if the very air was waiting for something. While Amara prepared for the ceremony, the groom did the same in another part of the palace. Prince Aldrich of Valmont was not what people expected. A formidable warrior, certainly, but also brilliant and deeply devoted to spiritual pursuits. When his family proposed the alliance, he made one demand: to meet his bride beforehand. Not a formal introduction, an actual encounter. And that encounter had happened 3 days prior, far from the court's curious gaze. Aldrich entered the garden where Amara walked each dawn. He didn't announce himself. Instead, he watched as she moved among the roses, fingers brushing each petal, head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. "The white roses are especially fragrant this morning," he finally said, voice soft. Amara didn't startle. She turned toward him with perfect precision. "Prince Aldrich, finally showing yourself. You've been there almost 10 minutes. That surprised him. No one noticed his approach. He'd been trained since childhood in silent movement. "How did you know I was there?" A smile touched her lips. "Do you truly want me to answer that?" Then Amara extended her hand. When he took it, more courtesy than expectation, he felt something that stopped him cold. It wasn't just her touch. It was as if in that moment she could see through him. Not his body, his soul, his intentions, his fears, his hopes. "You're afraid of this marriage," she said softly. "Not of you," he replied honestly. "Of whether I can be the husband you deserve." She smiled. "Then you've already answered your own fear." Something shifted inside him. Not attraction or obligation, recognition. This woman, treated by the court with barely hidden contempt, possessed a strength he'd rarely encountered in anyone. Now, as he prepared for the ceremony, Aldrich smiled at the memory. He'd entered that garden with doubts. He left with absolute certainty, and burning questions about exactly what Amara's gift was. He'd studied spiritual traditions long enough to recognize when he stood before something extraordinary. The blessing ceremony began at noon, an ancient ritual, rarely performed in full. But Amara's family had insisted on tradition. The high priestess, elderly, with eyes that seemed to pierce the world, conducted the sacred rites. The grand ceremonial hall had been transformed. Sandalwood and myrrh incense created aromatic clouds that danced in the filtered light of the high windows. Ancestral symbols had been painted on the floor with sacred pigments. And in the center of it all, Amara knelt on a silk cushion while the high priestess chanted the ancient invocations. "By the spirits of those who came before, by the guardians between worlds, by the ancestors who watch and protect." The high priestess's voice resonated from somewhere beyond the mortal realm. Then it happened. As the priestess placed the crown of white flowers on Amara's head, every candle in the hall flared, not gradually, all at once, as if an invisible current of power had touched them simultaneously. The flames leapt and danced, casting shadows that seemed alive on the stone walls. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The high priestess stopped, eyes wide and locked on Amara. She could see what others only sensed, a faint but unmistakable halo of golden light pulsing around the blind princess. "The ancestors answer," the priestess whispered, voice shaking with reverence. "The blessing is sealed. The spirits recognize their own." Lady Morgana, watching from among the nobles, felt ice slide down her spine. She scrambled for a rational explanation, a draft, a light trick, coincidence. But that deeper voice she'd suppressed for years knew the truth. The other priests had dropped to their knees, foreheads pressed to the ground in reverence. In decades of service, they'd never seen anything like this during a wedding blessing. This wasn't ritual. This was divine presence. Amara remained composed throughout, as if communing with spirits was routine, as if she did it every morning before breakfast. When she stood, gently helped by the priestess, who now treated her with something like reverence, she walked directly to Aldrich. No hesitation, no guidance. She moved with the certainty of someone who could see. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, for him alone. "I felt it," he replied, pulse quickening. "I understand now." A private smile passed between them. Recognition. a silent vow that this union was far more than politics. But not everyone could accept what they'd witnessed. Lady Morgana, watching control slip through her fingers like sand, decided on one final, desperate move. During the banquet, as nobles filled the hall, she rose with goblet raised. "A toast!" Her voice cut through the chatter. "To Princess Amara, may she find light in her endless darkness." The hall froze. The insult was wrapped in false concern, obvious yet impossible to directly confront. Classic Morgana poison. "In fact," she continued, emboldened by the shocked silence, "let's test whether the princess can even locate us in this crowd. She'll soon need to manage the duties of a royal wife. Come, princess, find me if you can. Let's see if that remarkable moment during the blessing was genuine or just clever staging." Gasps echoed through the hall. This had crossed every line of decency. Even Morgana's allies seemed uncomfortable. Amara set down her goblet with careful grace. Then she rose. Smooth, deliberate, no servant at her side, no guard offering an arm. She walked, through crowded tables, past nobles who quickly scattered. Her steps were certain, her bearing regal, her direction absolutely precise, as if she could see every table, every person, every chair. She stopped just meters from Lady Morgana, and did something unexpected. She smiled, not triumph or revenge, something far more unsettling, genuine sympathy. "Lady Morgana," Amara said, voice soft but clear in the silent hall. "You asked me to find you, but I don't need eyes for that, and I see far more than your location. What do you want from me?" Morgana snapped, but her voice shook. "To be seen," Amara answered simply. "Recognized. Someone to notice the pain buried under all that cultivated cruelty. You think your words hurt me, but you're really screaming for help, your own agony, plain to anyone who truly listens." The silence was absolute. Morgana's face cycled from pale to red. Because Amara had done the impossible, answered cruelty with truth so devastating it left no room for argument. "I see you, Lady Morgana," Amara continued. "The girl nobody ever chose, never loved the way she needed. I'm sorry your pain made you into this, but I won't let it poison today. Not for me, for you, because you're worth more than this role." Then, in front of 300 witnesses, Amara extended her hand, an offer of peace that was also a mirror she couldn't refuse. Morgana didn't take the hand, but she couldn't speak another cruel word either. She just stood there exposed, her armor shattered by a compassion sharper than any blade. Aldrich watched from his table, heart swelling. This extraordinary woman he was about to marry. This impossible, magnificent woman. The king then stood. "Begin the ceremony," he announced, voice firm but thick with emotion. "I think we've seen enough blessing for one lifetime." As guests filed toward the chapel, new energy pulsed through the palace. Anticipation, reverence, and for those who'd spent years dismissing Amara, a first bitter taste of reckoning. The procession formed. Musicians found their places. Flowers scattered down the chapel path. In her final preparation chamber, crown being adjusted in her hair, Amara felt something shift. Different air. More than pre-ceremony nerves. Something was coming. Something she'd sensed, but didn't yet understand. "Time," her old tutor whispered, touching her shoulder. "Yes," Amara agreed, though she meant more than the ceremony. She could feel it, in the energy currents of the palace, in the spirits always near her, in her own heartbeat, that truths would emerge before any vows were spoken. Truths that would shatter chains, expose hearts, transform everything. Justice did not scream its arrival. It simply waited for the perfect moment to reveal itself, and that moment was just a few steps away. The procession began at dusk. Golden light from the setting sun painted the sky amber and crimson. Amara walked down the temple aisle, steps measured, posture regal. No guide, no arm offered. Yet she moved with such certainty it seemed she could see everything, every flower, every guest, every candle. Prince Aldrich waited at the altar, eyes bright with admiration. When she reached him, he took her hand with reverence, as if touching something sacred. "You're beautiful," he whispered, knowing she couldn't see herself. She smiled. "I feel this place. I feel you. I feel everything." The priest began the ancient words that had bound generations, but tension hung in the air. Everyone sensed this wasn't an ordinary wedding. They were right. The moment the priest asked for Aldrich's vows, something extraordinary happened. The candles flared brighter. A subtle vibration moved through the air, not painful, but undeniable, as if the universe itself was breathing with them. Golden light began to radiate from Amara, not physical light, something everyone felt, a presence beyond mortal sight. The priests dropped to their knees. "The ancestors are present," the priest whispered, voice shaking. "They recognize this union. They bless this bond." In that moment, Aldrich understood. It wasn't his healing that saved the kingdom. It was Amara's arrival, the true seer, keeper of ancestral wisdom, the one who saw what others never could. His gift had been preparation to recognize her. The ceremony transformed. What had been a traditional wedding became something far greater. A revelation that would change not just Amara's fate, but the fate of everyone who witnessed this extraordinary moment. Amara's grandmother emerged from the crowd, white-haired, eyes blazing with ancestral knowledge. Though her voice wavered with age, it held undeniable authority. "You wanted answers," she said, moving toward the center of the hall. "Now you'll understand the truth standing before your eyes, the one most of you refuse to see." She stopped beside Amara, trembling hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. "For centuries, our bloodline has kept a secret. Each generation births one child with true sight, the ability to see through the soul, not the eyes. These children are born blind to the physical world because their spirits must see what matters. People's essence, truth hidden under masks, the future woven into present choices." The crowd hung on every word, transfixed. Some finally understood. Others resisted, but couldn't deny what they'd witnessed. "When Amara was born," the grandmother continued, "our elders saw the signs immediately. At 3, she described a garden she'd never seen. At 7, she stopped a fire that would have burned the whole village. At 10, she healed a child no doctor could save, just by touching him and seeing the sickness invisible to normal eyes." Tears streamed down guests' faces. Amara's mother, silent through years of judgment and cruelty, finally let her own tears flow. "But this gift," the grandmother said, voice thick with pain, "demands payment. To see everything, you sacrifice normal sight. To truly understand others, you walk through darkness alone." Amara endured trials that would destroy most people. Nights asking why she was different. Days bearing scorn from those who should have protected her. Yet she chose to use her gift for healing, not revenge. To understand, not judge. Lady Morgana's legs gave way. The aristocrat who'd led the cruelest taunts, who'd spent years mocking Amara, organizing events to exclude her, spreading rumors about her as a burden to the kingdom. Now facing undeniable truth, Morgana confronted her own cruelty. Words wouldn't come. She looked at Amara, still serene, no hint of anger. That grace cut deeper than any accusation. "I was so cruel." Amara's white eyes fixed on a point that seemed to pierce Morgana's soul. "You weren't cruel, Lady Morgana," Amara said gently. "You were afraid. Afraid of what you didn't understand. Afraid that if someone different could matter, maybe your beauty, wealth, status weren't the most important things." Morgana's legs buckled, not from shame in front of people, from finally seeing herself. For the first time in her life, someone had looked past her masks, her careful smiles, her contempt dressed as superiority. "Forgive me," she whispered. And those 2 words carried decades of bitterness finally being released. But Morgana wasn't alone. Lord Cassius, the royal advisor who'd fiercely opposed the marriage because Amara would supposedly contaminate the bloodline, now faced his own reckoning. "You spoke of blood purity, Lord Cassius," Amara said, turning toward him. "But I see what you hide. You're not pure blood. Your grandmother was a peasant. You've spent your whole life erasing that, blaming others for the shame you feel about yourself." Cassius went white. The secret he'd guarded, buried under false documents and paid silence, was now exposed, not with cruelty, but with crystal clarity. "I never," he began, but the words died in his throat. There was no denying it. Everyone saw the truth in his wide eyes, in the trembling of his hands. He did not respond with a plea for forgiveness like Morgana. Instead, he turned and left the hall, unable to face the reflection of himself that Amara had revealed. One by one, those who had mocked, ridiculed, excluded, and belittled Amara over the years found themselves confronted not with vengeful accusations, but with something far more powerful: the truth about themselves. Marcus, the young noble who had organized cruel imitations of the blind princess at private parties, discovered that Amara knew exactly why he did it: to hide his own insecurity about a secret he kept, an impossible love for someone society would never accept. "You can love whoever your heart chooses, Marcus," Amara said gently. "The only true prison is the one you build with fear of others' judgment." Marcus's tears were of liberation. For the first time, someone had seen not his masks, but his true self, and had not condemned him. As these revelations unfolded, something extraordinary happened in the hall. The atmosphere changed. What had begun as shock and disbelief now transformed into deep understanding. People began to realize that Amara was not exerting power over them. She was offering liberation. Among the crowd, a young servant named Elena, who had silently witnessed years of cruelty directed at Amara, finally found the courage to approach. Her hands trembled as she knelt before the princess. "Forgive me, Your Highness," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I saw everything. I saw how they treated you, and I never said anything. I was a coward. Amara extended her hand, touching the young woman's face with a gentleness that made Elena cry even more intensely. "You were not a coward, Elena," Amara said softly. "You were prudent. A servant cannot defy nobility without consequences. But your heart was always kind to me." That never went unnoticed. The fact that Amara knew Elena's name, remembered every small kindness. A flower left in her room, kind words whispered in halls, made that moment sacred. Elena wasn't alone. Dozens of palace workers, people who'd seen the real Amara while the nobles mocked, finally felt recognized and valued. Then Prince Aldrich approached. He knelt before her, not submitting but honoring truth. "I thought I was choosing you despite your blindness," he said, voice thick. "But I understand now it wasn't my choice. It was destiny. You see what I need to see. You're the light that will guide not just me, but the entire kingdom." Amara touched his face, genuine smile bright. "We'll guide together," she replied. "Real leadership isn't one person above another. It's seeing each other's blind spots and walking side by side." The king, who'd sat watching, stood. His posture was no longer rigid authority, but learned humility. He walked to Amara and before the entire court bowed. "Today," he announced, voice ringing, "we celebrate more than a marriage. We welcome a true seer to our kingdom. From now, Princess Amara is not just consort, she's royal counselor. Her voice shapes every kingdom decision. Because we finally understand, seeing isn't about eyes. It's about wisdom, compassion, and strength." The crowd erupted, not polite ceremony applause, but genuine ovation, thick with admiration, regret, joy, and hope. Amara stood centered, serene and graceful. No arrogant triumph. No "I was right" look, just peace. The peace of someone who always knew her own worth, who still felt grateful to finally be truly seen. The ceremony continued, but transformed. No longer formal ritual, but true celebration of love, truth, redemption, new beginnings. As the priest resumed vows, everyone understood. This wasn't just two people marrying. It was a kingdom finally finding its conscience. A people who'd learned the difference between seeing and truly understanding. At the heart of that awakening was Amara, no longer the blind princess they'd mocked, but the seer they needed. The ceremony ended with golden sunset light on the horizon. 3 drum strikes announced the marriage sealed. As guests scattered to celebrate, something extraordinary began unfolding in the weeks ahead. Something that would transform not just one person, but an entire people. In the days after the wedding, Amara felt the shift, subtle at first. Market vendors who'd avoided her now greeted her warmly. Children who'd laughed stopped doing it. Elders who'd condemned her blindness as punishment now sought her wisdom. An elderly woman approached, voice trembling. Months earlier, she'd spit as Amara passed. "Princess, may I speak with you?" Amara paused, staff touching the ground. She didn't need to see the woman's face to sense the weight of her shame. "Of course," Amara replied gently. The woman's voice broke. "I was cruel to you. I called you cursed. I told my daughters you were someone to avoid. And now I see my own blindness. Can you forgive me?" Amara extended her hand, finding rough, weathered fingers. "I forgave long ago. Not for you, but for myself. Because holding anger traps you in a darkness worse than blindness." Tears ran down the woman's face. She held Amara's hand like a lifeline. How? How did you stay kind when everyone was so cruel?" Amara smiled, a smile that seemed to hold its own light. "Because I learned what few understand. What people judge in you says more about them than about you. You called me blind, but I saw things regular eyes never see. Kindness in the tone of a voice, truth in pauses between words, the fear hiding under contempt." Change swept through like fire. Across the kingdom, hard conversations happened. Parents apologized to children for teaching judgment instead of compassion. Men examined how they'd treated women who were different. Young people demanded answers. Why had elders allowed this cruelty? The Council of Elders, who'd pressured the king to hide Amara, called a public meeting. The oldest, whose words had been cruelest, stood before hundreds. "We failed," he said, voice shaking. "As leaders, as keepers of wisdom, we failed badly. We let fear and tradition blind us to real value. We judged by looks, by ability, by conformity. We nearly destroyed something precious that was always there." He turned to where Amara sat with Aldrich. "Princess, you taught us something decades of learning never could. Real power isn't about seeing with your eyes, but with your heart. Wisdom doesn't come from sight, it comes from understanding. And human worth isn't measured by what you can do, but by who you are." The community committed to real change. Not just words, action. They created a council where people with disabilities, physical, mental, social, had guaranteed voices in decisions. They rewrote old sayings that carried prejudice. They taught children to question surface judgments. And Amara, she became more than princess. She became spiritual advisor, mediator, voice for justice rooted in compassion. Her blindness, once weakness, was now wisdom of a different kind. She listened without appearance distracting her. She judged untouched by beauty or status. She decided from essence, never surface. One warm afternoon, walking palace gardens with Aldrich, he asked, "Are you happy?" She paused, face tilted to the sun. Jasmine's scent drifted past. Children laughed somewhere beyond. Wind carried songs being relearned with new, kinder words. "Happy isn't enough," she said. "I'm complete, at peace. Exactly where I should be." He held her and she leaned into his chest. His heartbeat steady, true. Everything about him was true. "I didn't fall in love with you despite your blindness," he whispered. "Because of it. Because it made you exactly who you are. Because it forced you to develop perceptions most people never will. Because it taught you compassion through pain, wisdom through exclusion, strength through suffering. And I learned," she replied softly, "that real love doesn't see limitations. It sees possibilities, doesn't focus on flaws, celebrates what's unique, doesn't ask for fixing, asks for celebration." In the following months, her influence grew. Delegations from surrounding kingdoms arrived seeking wisdom. "How do we change our culture?" they'd ask. Amara's answer never varied. Not through pretty speeches or rules imposed, through living proof. Show through action that those called lesser have irreplaceable value. Give voice to the voiceless, power to the powerless, a stage to the invisible. Then watch how what you feared as weakness becomes the strength you desperately needed. One evening at a royal feast, a young woman limped over, tears in her eyes. A childhood accident left her scarred. "Princess Amara," she whispered. "I used to hide. I was ashamed to walk in public. People pointed, laughed, called me damaged. But when I saw you, how you turned something that made you different into something powerful, I found hope." Amara took her hands. "You're not broken. You're unique. And refusing to let the world define your worth, that's immense power." "But how?" the woman asked. "How didn't you become bitter?" Amara paused. "Because I realized something essential. When people judge you for things you can't control, they're revealing their own limits, not your worth. Every cruel word, every rejection, every scornful moment, none of it was about me. It was their fear, ignorance, smallness, and I stopped carrying their emotional weight. Change wasn't perfect. Moments of old prejudice still surfaced. But something shifted fundamentally, awareness. When someone judged carelessly, others intervened. Remember Princess Amara? Remember how wrong we were? Most importantly, children grew up differently. A generation seeing diversity as strength, celebrating differences instead of fearing them, understanding deep down that surface judgment meant limited vision. Years later, when Amara gave birth, celebration spread everywhere. But what touched people wasn't just the healthy baby. It was Amara from that first moment holding the child with absolute confidence. "She can't care for a baby," some had whispered. "How can a blind woman raise a child?" Others doubted. But seeing Amara fingers exploring every part of the infant with tenderness, voice soothing cries with ancient songs, body moving with natural grace, they finally understood. She wasn't a blind mother managing a baby. She was a mother. Full stop. And her way of mothering, shaped by different perceptions, held its own kind of beauty. She'd teach her child to listen deeply, to feel fully, to see past surfaces. That night, under stars she'd never see, Amara thought about her path. From mockery to respect, shame to strength, exclusion to leadership. "What would you tell young Amara?" her husband asked gently. "The one who cried believing she was cursed?" She smiled. A smile now recognized as wisdom throughout the region. "I'd say, you were never the blind one. They were. You saw what matters, the essence beneath appearances. Truth beneath words, light even in darkness. And one day the world will finally learn to see as you do." She paused, listening to her baby's soft breathing nearby. "And one more thing, those who hurt you weren't enemies. They were teachers. They taught you resilience through rejection, wisdom through pain, strength through struggle. And when you see the gift hidden inside the curse, you become far more powerful than you ever dreamed." Night wind carried celebration echoes drifting through the village. A changed community, a reimagined culture. A generation learning that power hides exactly where the world refuses to look. In that moment of perfect peace, Amara grasped the deepest truth. Her worth never required proof. It always existed. What shifted wasn't her. It was the world finally recognizing what should have been obvious. Seeing with eyes is the most surface level of vision. Those called blind often perceive truths that ordinary sight never reaches. Her journey wasn't about beating limitation. It was the world realizing the limitation was never hers. It was theirs, and finally, they too were learning to see.